Good morning, everybody. You're very welcome to our Signpost Series webinar this morning. My name is Andy Boland, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so as we discuss and talk about another issue of farming in the environment. Our series is brought to you in conjunction with Dairy Sustainability Ireland, Food Drink Ireland SkillNet, and the National Rural Network. And just to remind you that this morning's presentation, together with all of the previous presentations that we've had over the last nearly 3 years, are available on our Teagasc website for you to download. Also, we do a podcast version, which is available wherever you decide to download your podcasts. I'd also like to remind you as well that if you could use the Q&A function to put in any comments or questions that you might have for this morning's speaker. So this morning, I'm delighted to be joined by James Lusby from Birdwatch Ireland. And James is going to talk to us about how farmers can help barn owls. So good morning, John Lusby. Morning, John.
No problem.
And
thanks, Andy.
I'm also joined by James Mullane. James is a colleague from the Tipperary region in Teagasc. James is a dairy advisor based out of Clonmel, and James is going to give us a hand with the Q&A afterwards, and keep an eye on the questions as they're coming in. So thanks for joining us, James, this morning, giving us a dig out.
Thanks, Andy.
So, John, if you could tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and indeed perhaps a little bit about Birdwatch Ireland.
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Andy. That was a relief. I got a shock for a minute. I thought it was just me that couldn't hear you. So glad we got over that. So thanks very much, Andy and Teagasc for inviting me. Delighted to be here for the Signpost series. So my name is John Lusby. I work with Birdwatch Ireland, and we're the largest independent environmental organisation in the country, and we're dedicated to the protection of wild birds and their habitats. And we do that through a range of a variety of work, through species and habitat conservation, as well as research and monitoring and policy and advocacy. And what I'm going to be talking about today, I think, kind of spans across all those areas, and we're going to focus on barn owls. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we have done, what we've learned about barn owls. I've been working on barn owls for almost 15 years now. So quite a stretch, and over that time we really have increased our understanding of barn owl populations in this country, but also as well what they require from a conservation perspective. And there's quite a few positives in the talk this morning, because it's a species that we have seen a slow population recovery in recent times, and that's in no small part due to the conservation efforts as well as other factors, but definitely the fact that so many people, individuals and groups have come on board to try and help barn owls and to implement conservation measures, and particularly farmers on the ground. So I'm going to be talking a bit about that, a bit about some of the successes, but also some of the areas that we still need to to improve upon. So I've titled the talk how can farmers help barn owls, but maybe a more appropriate title would be how farmers can help themselves as well by helping barn owls. And that's one of the really positive things with barn owls, is that any measures for barn owls are going to have knock-on benefits for the landowner, for other wildlife, for other biodiversity. So I think that there's lessons to learn from that too, and potentially apply to other species and in other areas of conservation. So I'm hopefully going to. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, thanks very much. You could just. You begin to share your presentation now, John, so you can fire away. You begin your presentation.
Yeah, you can see the presentation there, yeah?
Yeah, everything is fine,
great.
yeah.
Okay, so this is the bird that all the trouble is about, that all the interest is in, and I'm going to give a brief introduction to the bird. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with barn owls already, but just to give you a bit of background on the species. So this is mostly, if you're looking up to catch a glimpse of a barn owl, is mostly the view you get just from beneath, and to see this beautiful ghostly white bird. Very and Irish barn owls are particularly white, particularly pale. So absolutely magnificent birds, as you can see, quite rare to see, because obviously they're nocturnal. They only come out at night, so it's often a quick glimpse. Often as it flies across the road, just you catch a glimpse of it in the car headlights. So, but one of the things, if you do get a look at the barn owls, one of the things that is quite obvious immediately is the fact that they are a predatory bird. They're, they're just by looking at them, they're designed for hunting, for catching their prey, catching small mammals. And there's a few, really interesting adaptations that you see with barn owls. Obviously, the very the long legs, sharp talons, that's helps diving into deep grass, deep vegetation to catch their prey, which is mostly small mammals, which I'll talk about. That they also have a really interesting adaptation of barn owls. They also have almost completely silent flight, and their wings are specially adapted to reduce the wind flow and the noise when they are flying. And that's obviously really useful because that means then that they're not making a lot of noise when they're flying to which would disturb the prey that they're looking for, but also as well that they're not making a lot of noise, which means they can focus on listening for their prey. And that's actually their main hunting tool, is that they got very, very acute hearing, and that's helped by this characteristic facial disc that they have, which looks beautiful, but it also serves a purpose, almost like a satellite dish, which helps funnel the sounds towards their ears, which are just tucked behind that facial disc, and very, very large ears. You obviously can't see them; they're tucked behind the feathers, but very, very large ears for the size of the bird, and really, really incredible hearing. And that's mostly how they find and locate their prey. And this is mostly what they're feeding on. And obviously, barn owls as well, being a predatory species, being a top predator, they fill a really important role within the environment. They help to keep the likes of rodent populations in check, but also as well it means that because they're a top predator, we can learn an awful lot about the health of the countryside by how barn owls are faring by studying barn owls. And obviously, because they're right at the top of the food chain, they're going to be affected by anything that happens, beneath them within the food chain. So say, for example, a habitat loss, which might affect small mammals, you're going to see those effects, within barn owl populations. But likewise, positive improvements in habitats, again, you're going to see that reflected in barn owl populations. And we've learned a huge amount, not only about barn owls, but about, the wider environment through the work that we've carried out on barn owls, and I'll hopefully capture a little bit about that. But as well as that, there's a whole range of reasons why barn owls are important, and why they're important, particularly in Ireland. And they're an interesting species because they're still a very rare bird in Ireland. Still, a lot of people have never actually seen a barn owl, but they're instantly recognisable to practically to almost everybody. And they're also a species that people just tend to, gravitate towards. People have a really special link with barn owls in Ireland. And there's probably a few reasons for that. And one of those is that they're so closely linked to our mythology, our folklore. They're one of the reasons behind the legend of the Banshee, this lady that comes out at night and screams and foretells death in the family. And you can imagine why, when you hear the barn owl screech and scream, the quite eerie sounds. So imagine hearing that in the dead of night and not knowing what's behind it or what's responsible. So that's an adult, that's a screech. And then this sound that I'm going to play, this is if any of you have heard this is a really magical sound to hear in the summer months, because this is the young barn owls. And a lot of people think, associate the sound of an owl with, the twit-twoo, but that's not at all what a barn owl sounds like. And this is the call that I'm going to play. This is what we call snoring. It sounds like snoring or hissing, which is the call of young barn owls. So if you hear this sound, that there's young in the nest, that birds are doing well. And again, probably behind a lot of the myths of haunted houses, when you're hearing this strange sound, if you don't know what's responsible, you can understand why, a lot of stories about haunted houses, and particularly ruined derelict buildings, which barn owls typically frequent. Another reason why they're very important is because of what they do, just as you can see here in this image. And they have been known as the farmer's friend, the barn owl, and there's very good reason for that. And as I mentioned, they're a species that, as soon as you start talking about barn owls to somebody, generally, you see, the face light up, you see people are interested. And if we go back a few generations, in the days before we had rat poisons or rodenticides, barn owls were one of the best means of natural rodent control, and they were actively encouraged to nest on the farm and particularly in the farmyard because of the benefit that they brought in terms of catching and feeding on rats and mice. And we've seen it ourselves from using nest cameras. Birds can catch up to 25 rodents in a single night during the summer. So you can imagine, just having them on the farm, the benefits that can bring. And you see some of the older stone buildings, stone farm buildings as well, still have special access, owl windows and special access to encourage birds and allow them to enter into the buildings and to nest in the loft space or in other areas within the buildings. And the reason for that is, we're seen as hugely lucky to have a pair of barn owls nesting on the farm or in the farmyard. And that, that love for owls has definitely still maintained and still continued. And probably another reason as well why that they're so well known is the fact that they're the emblem of the Late Late Show, and a huge portion of the population sees them every Friday night on the Late Late Show. But I suppose from our perspective, there were there are a lot of reasons why we wanted to focus on barn owls in particular, and why we saw them as important to learn more about them. And one of the main reasons for that was because we know and we knew that that barn owl populations have struggled over recent decades and have declined quite substantially over the past kind of 50, 60 years. And I suppose, similar to a lot of farmland birds, the likes of, curlew, corncrake, yellowhammer, a lot of species, associated or dependent on farmland have followed a similar kind of downward decline. So it's important to understand what's driving those declines and what we can do about it to halt and reverse those declines. So just to give you an idea here, this is a map from the Breeding Atlas, which is a survey of all birds across Ireland and Britain, and it's carried out every 20 years. So this is the results showing barn owl distribution from the first Breeding Atlas, which shows that population birds are still very widespread. But with particularly down the southwest, and that still remains the case. But if we fast track 20 years on, we can see there was a huge change and a huge decline in barn owls over that period, and that was really the time that they suffered most, and that the population declined to its greatest extent, and that was from the 60s onwards. More recently, the most recent Breeding Atlas showed a slight increase, but very much, in Munster in particular, and also as well, we also need to bear in mind that this was the time that we started really, increasing the efforts and looking for barn owls, which probably played a part in this as well. But it all showed that essentially, the population had declined, and we needed to do something about that. So they are what we call a red-listed bird of conservation concern. So just like the traffic light system, red, amber, green, with red being those that we're most worried about, that are most endangered. And the barn owl has been on the red list of birds of conservation concern since we established this list in the first place. Hopefully, over time, we may be able to remove the barn owl from the red list, but I think that will be a little bit of time to come. So I'm going to talk now about, because I suppose before we talk about what we can do to help barn owls and conservation measures, we need to know why they have declined in the first place and the factors that affect them. So I'll run through some of those that we now know from our research and from our monitoring. And one of those is, well, I suppose, and they all kind of generally fit into, the category of general changes, in the countryside and also, in intensification of agriculture. But one of the factors that can affect barn owls and that has, at least in certain parts of the country, is the loss of nesting sites. And barn owls, just like their name implies, they're very closely associated with farm buildings, with farmyards. And they would traditionally nest in old stone farm buildings. So as we lose those types of buildings in the countryside, and as they're replaced by more modern buildings with less nesting opportunities in them, that can affect barn owls in terms of reducing the nest sites that are available to them. Now, the good thing about that is that this is something that's quite easy to address by providing purpose-built nest boxes, and it's something that we've had and through loads of farmers that have taken these measures, provided nest boxes themselves. It's really starting to show benefit, which I'll talk about shortly. Another reason that, or another factor that affects barn owls, and probably the one that would be one of the most concerning currently, is how barn owls are affected by the use of rat poisons or rodenticides. And I mentioned about barn owls being, the important role that they play as rodent predators, and they can have, there's huge benefits from that. But there's also the downside of that is the fact that they are very susceptible to being exposed to rodenticides, to rat poisons, because of the fact that they feed to a large extent on rodents, on rats and mice, but other small mammals as well. And the problems can occur where the rodenticides are used, but they can be taken by rats or mice. And then if that rat or mouse is then taken by a barn owl, these toxins that they what's known as bioaccumulate, they can move up through the food chain, pass from one species to the next. And obviously with barn owls sitting at the top of the food chain, they are quite susceptible. So we're actually currently carrying out work to look at exposure rates in barn owls from rodenticides, but we previously carried out work, and the results were not unexpected, but also really showed the extent of exposure, and very, very worrying. So out of the birds that we tested, 69 birds, the vast majority, over 88%, had detectable levels of rodenticides in their systems, which shows basically that the majority of the wild population are exposed to rodenticides. It's not a problem that's restricted to barn owls alone. In fact, the more we're increasingly advancing our understanding as to the widespread nature of contamination of rodenticides within the food chain, within the ecosystem, and we know that right down the lower levels of the food chain, the likes of even invertebrates, they can be they can consume rodenticide bait, they can be exposed, and then obviously they can pass it on to other species that feed on them, likes of songbirds and mammals, and all the way up to the top predators. So it is something that remains a real concern, and something that we need to do more about. And I'll talk a bit about some of those measures shortly. Another factor which affects barn owls is road mortalities, being killed on roads. And of all the birds, they are by far and away the most susceptible to being hit on roads, and particularly major roads, the likes of dual carriageway, motorways in particular. And we've learned, and we've carried out a lot of research in this area, and we've learned that one of the reasons for that is because they're actually attracted to hunt along along the roadside verges. And this might seem, it's somewhat separate in relation to farming and land management, but it actually is very closely linked, because obviously the birds are attracted to these two roadside verges for a reason, and that's because they provide really the habitat for small mammals. They're full of these small mammals like great white-leafed shrew and wood mouse and bankfoal, and that's probably a reflection as well of the wider landscape and the habitats available to barn owls in the wider landscape. But it's also something that we've managed to make some progress on, and we have developed specific mitigation measures for barn owls for major roads, which are now a requirement for all new major roads. So that is something that is that is definitely positive, and we hope that it's possible to now retrofit some of the existing roads which are remain very problematic, and particularly some of the motorways. But at least we're moving in the right direction in relation to trying to reduce the effects of mortality on roads. But it does bring us to and just as I mentioned, that's probably the most important factor that has affected barn owls over that period that you've seen the declines, is the changes in land use changes and the loss of suitable foraging habitat. I'm just going to show you a couple of short videos now, just to better than I would capture it myself, just to give you a visual of barn owls and how they use the landscapes and what habitats are important. So A couple of years back, while researching, this as part of our study on looking at barn owls and major roads, we wanted to look at, where birds went at night time, where they hunted, and what habitats were important for them. So this bird that you can see here was fitted with a special GPS transmitter, which allowed us to monitor their movements, in very fine detail, as they were out and about at night and hunting. And just to give you an idea, and we fitted, I think it was 15 birds with these GPS transmitters. This is just a very short clip which shows the movement of a female nesting in this farmyard, and this shows her movement out. And just if you focus on, you'll see that she starts hunting here now, and you can see she's essentially just focusing on the hedgerows, ignoring the field, the interior of the fields, and just focusing on the hedgerows, flying quite slow up and down the hedgerows. Then she comes to the edge of the motorway. This is the M8 motorway, and we know she then caught prey, because then she flies in a quite fast, in a more or less a direct line back to the nest site. And we saw that time and time again, that the birds would have a large home range, but they could move 6-7 kilometers easily from their nest site, but they had they had favorite foraging areas within that. So and obviously you could see there just how important the hedgerows were. But also then, certain, other habitats like wild bird cover was really, really important, areas of rough grassland. So it just emphasizes, just how important, hedgerow management is, but also, retaining, more natural areas. And even if that's, small areas on farm, we could see that, just how important that was for the birds. And also you could see just the fact that they were attracted very much to the roadside verge because of the rough grass margins that were there. But as I say, so there are some of the factors that are affecting barn owls. But in general, what we are seeing, and it's fantastic to see, is a slow population recovery. And we're seeing, barn owls returning to areas that they haven't been for in some cases, several decades. And that's really, really positive. And so you can see the map here. It does. These are all the barn owl nest sites. So close to 700 that we have recorded through our monitoring over the years. And you can see there's a very much a bias towards the southwest, towards Munster, and that's still. And even when the population was, it had declined, quite significantly, Munster really, and you're talking kind of, Cork, Kerry, Limerick, Tipperary in particular, that remains the stronghold for barn owls, and it still does. But it's great to see that birds are starting to increase, elsewhere, and move, kind of starting to a slow but steady, increase kind of further north and east. They're also a species that we rely heavily on in relation to citizen science. So people reporting information to us. So farmers and local community groups where they see a barn owl, repeating that back to us, and that really helps us understand where birds are, the distribution of the population, and build up a picture as to how they're faring in different parts of the country, and where we might need to to invest further conservation efforts. So just to give you an idea of the types of places, the types of nest sites that they use. Still very much barn owls are still really associated and really dependent on old ruined stone structures such as this, and these are still the some of the most common nest sites for barn owls. And I would say not only barn owls, but important for a huge range of other species like kestrels and swifts, and the species of bat, and peregrine falcon, and a huge range of other wildlife. So a really, really important part of our countryside. But for barn owls, one of the most important nest sites. But also as well, farmhouses, abandoned farmhouses, and farm buildings are hugely important. And once there's a suitable nest site within these types of buildings, then they'll use a whole different range of nest sites within these buildings. So such as in the chimneys, or this is one here that we filmed barn owls at fairly recently. This is an old water tank in the roof space that is obviously dried out, and the birds have made a very comfortable home there. So this is 2 chicks in the in the old water tank in this farmhouse. And you see this is one of the adults coming back with prey. It tends to reach fever pitch when the adults go back. But an important sound to remember, if you do hear it on the farm or if you do hear it close by, then now hopefully you'll know what's making it. But as well as buildings, birds will also use mature trees with hollow cavities, and where there are these nesting opportunities, then brown owls will happily move into to tree nests as well. But probably most relevant in terms of conservation measures is as nest sites is nest boxes. Now this is quite an elaborate nest box, obviously on a pole, but they can be really simple in terms of their design and in terms of their placement. And we've had it's been a huge success with providing nest boxes for brown owls. We have done it ourselves to a large extent, but also like a huge number of farmers themselves have put up nest boxes, and we're seeing every year we see an increase in terms of the number of pairs of brown owl pairs that use nest boxes. Last year, and I think we're well over 150 pairs now using nest boxes, which is amazing. I remember when I started working on brown owls, there was 2 brown owl nest boxes that were used in the whole country that we knew of. Whereas now it's completely different, and it's increasing every year. And it's such a simple but such an important measure to undertake, and can have real benefits. But the real benefits we see are when the provision of nest boxes is also accompanied by other measures related to rodent control and habitat improvement, habitat enhancement. There's a lot more elaborate nesting sites created for barn owls, but you don't need to go to this level of effort at all. You know, sometimes the simple nest box can be hugely effective if you have a suitable site and suitable habitat. So I just want to capture then I suppose to give you an idea as to the status of barn owls and how they're faring. And I'm going to focus just on a couple of counties, because the approach that we have taken in recent years is because the population is increasing, and because like they're widespread around the country, it becomes quite a challenge to keep tabs and to keep monitoring on a national scale. So the approach we've taken with support from local authorities and the National Parks and Wildlife Service is to focus on individual counties in recent years, kind of focusing on 3 or 4 counties a year, trying to get as much information as we can on barn owls, their trends, build up a picture of their distribution within those counties, and then and then that serves really important resource. We know where the nest sites are, we know where protection measures should be implemented. But just to give you an idea, so this is County Galway obviously, and we carried out a survey here in 2021, and this is the results of the survey. So the red squares are where we found confirmed barn owl nest sites, the yellow is where we probable nesting, but then the white is where we didn't record barn owls. And you can see there's very much a bias from east to west here with them, and there's very little, very few barn owls as you go out, kind of towards west of the county towards Connemara. But you can see the east of the county, very, very widespread. And just to give you an idea, this is the map from if we go back 10 years ago, and this is our findings from 2021. So over that period, you can see there was quite a change in the right direction. So we recorded a 67% increase over the past 10 years in terms of barn owl range, which was absolutely fantastic to see, and that's reflected in all of the other counties that we actually focused on as well. To give you an idea, this is the map of barn owl distribution from if we go back 50 years ago, essentially in the 60s, and so you can see it's quite similar, in fact, to what we found in 2021. So that's kind of telling us that barn owls obviously were widespread and were more abundant going back 50, 60 years ago, and then obviously experienced quite a dramatic decline from the 60s onwards. But now we're starting to see that slow recovery that I mentioned, and it's fantastic to see, because obviously there's a lot of species that are moving in the other direction, and their status is getting even worse. So to see this slow population recovery with barn owls is hugely positive. Similar situation in Kilkenny, and it was probably even worse here in terms of barn owl numbers going back a few decades ago. But just to give you an idea, this is again is from 10 years ago to 2021. So a huge change in the right direction that we observed. And that is, I would say that conservation measures that are implemented by landowners on the ground, by ourselves, they are definitely helping. But there's also other factors, and probably this is probably one of the main ones, is that we think that the arrival of this guy, the greater white-toothed shrew, which I'm sure some of you will be familiar with, and it's spread across the country, seems to be benefiting barn owl populations, and they seem to be so it is an invasive species, an invasive small mammal. It was accidentally introduced to Ireland, initially discovered in Tipperary back in 2008, but has since spreading very, very quickly throughout the country. And barn owls absolutely love these. They feed to a great extent on them where they occur. And we are seeing that as the great white-toothed shrew expands its range, we're seeing, the fortunes of barn owls change in these areas as well. And where the great white-toothed shrew still hasn't reached, we're not seeing much change in barn owl numbers, still occurring in very, very, very low numbers. So it's a really interesting situation. And so it's not, the recovery isn't solely down to the conservation measures, but this does provide, a really, really good opportunity to make sure that we now implement the measures to make sure that, the population remains stabilized, and that, we're not having this conversation in 5-10 years time and talking about barn owl declines again. So there's, so it's a really good opportunity, and there's been a huge surge of interest and of, a willingness towards barn owl conservation recently, which is absolutely amazing to see. And it's amazing to see the results of that. And one of the instruments of that is that I'm sure some of you are aware there is a specific action for barn owls in acres, which essentially focuses on, and it's not rocket science at all. It's quite simple and straightforward. We know the measures that benefit barn owls, and one of them being, providing a nest box if you have a suitable location for nest boxes, but also complementing that with improved rodent control practices, so reducing or hopefully eliminating the risk of exposure to rodenticides, but then also improving the habitat, providing suitable habitat. And if you can align those three elements, then we've seen it time and time again that barn owls will thrive and barn owls will do well, and not only barn owls but a whole range of other wildlife. So so this is the barn owl action, but it's relevant regardless of whether you're in the agri environment scheme or not. These are the measures that work. So just to give you an idea of it, so we developed quite detailed guidance to try and inform the measure. So to inform, firstly, whether your farm is suitable for this action, and then if it is, where the nest box should be sited, how to, what the nest box design is, how to install the nest box, how to ensure there's no disturbance, to the nest box, but also as well the other measures like improved rodent control practice and improved habitat enhancement. And probably the last one is probably the most difficult, the most challenging, but also the one that I want to see the most benefits of if that can be implemented appropriately. So and again, just to say, if I have time, I'll play a short video at the end from a farmer in Kilkenny, but who's a much better spokesperson for barn owls than I am, because he's someone that that's on the ground, that he's a farmer, and that he has encouraged barn owls onto his land, and he's now seeing the benefits of it. He doesn't have to use rodenticides anymore because the barn owls are doing all that work for him. He's incredibly passionate about the birds. He's almost watching them on a nightly basis, and it just goes to show what can be done and what can be achieved, and just goes to show that these measures work as well and do have benefits. But in relation to the barn owl nest box, as I say, it's not rocket science. It's about identifying if you have a suitable location on the farm for a nest box, and if you do, it's a really good way to encourage barn owls and to provide a safe, secure, suitable nest site. and that can be within a building, as you can see here, or alternatively, outside of a building, the gable end of a building, or on a tree, as you can see here. And as I say, we've had, there's the uptake has been absolutely fantastic, and it can take some time. It can take a number of years before a box might become occupied. But just the trend towards the increase in the number of boxes that we're seeing being occupied is absolutely phenomenal. And I would imagine that this breeding season we may reach over 200 occupied nest boxes that birds are breeding in, which is absolutely fantastic. And that has other benefits as well. It means that firstly, we know where the birds are. They're in nest boxes. There's probably less of a risk of disturbance, or of, say, for example, every single breeding season there's issues with them where birds are nesting in derelict or abandoned buildings, and they they might be renovated or not, and obviously there's issues there then if it's not known that the birds are nesting there. Whereas with nest boxes, it's much easier to determine, are the birds nesting there, and to ensure that they're safe as a result of that. And then the changes to rodent control, and this is such an important area, and one that will have such wider benefits, not just not only barn owls, but and I would say there's the campaign for responsible rodenticide use has really good. You've probably seen it, and there's literature and guidance that's been sent around to I think all farmers in the country, but that there is really good guidance in terms of the measures to take to improve rodent control, and then obviously habitat management and habitat improvement, leaving space for wildlife, and that can be hedgerow management, leaving the wide verges. It can be we've seen as well some of the measures like wild bird cover, or I think winter bird food, as I think the name has changed to, is really valuable habitat for barn owls and for other predators. So the knowledge is there for what in terms of the habitat enhancement, but it's about implementing that as best we can, and we know the benefits that'll come from that. And I'm not sure, Andy, how I'm doing for time there. Are we?
Yeah, we're maybe another few minutes. There's a huge number of questions coming in, John, and I would just like try and get through them. So
I might just play this video then, if that's okay. It's just a few minutes, and then I'll keep quiet.
We put up a box there just beside the last year's nest, and moved out of that tree into the new box that we made. So it was great to see him going into the new box, but we weren't sure for a long time. And then I used to come out in the mornings here, and I would find a pellet on the ground, a little pellet that the bird would regurgitate, and I knew they were feeding and everything was going well then at that stage. So it was, we had him back. That was fantastic, so it was. Well, there's 2 chicks in the nest box this year, but they're in and out there the whole time, and we've seen them going in with food into the birds, into the chicks in the box. I've been out in the yard in the night time, and you don't hear the birds flying, but I've seen something going over my head, and it's just gone. And it's, I'm actually, when I go out in the night time, I'm going like the owl itself, looking around in the sky now, so I am. Because you just kind of get more conscious of the birds in the surroundings when you're used to them. But you'd hear them every night squealing in the background. We can hear them when we're in the bed, squealing, so we can. We leave the window open a small bit, and we can hear them. You know when the mothers come with food, because there'll be I can't describe the screech of it. We'll be there, oh, she's there again. That's the way it is. But it was like a film for us, because we could sit in the couch in the kitchen looking at them, and we used to knock off the telly and just sit all night looking at the birds with their head out, because sometimes the sensor light of the house would come on and it would brighten it up, and you'd have a great view of them. It was the best entertainment. It was the best seat in the house. Most nights you'd see something, so you'd see them glimmering in the background. It's fantastic. It's hard to describe what you're looking at, because it is special to see it now. One night they were out, it was about half 8, 9 o'clock, and we were able to see them, and they were bopping, and they were like they were at a disco bopping around, so they were. But that night in particular, it was fantastic now to see it. So it was. But the minute you come out the front door, they'd fly away. The older mother or father, or whoever it is, they'd fly away. But before we'd go out, you'd know, oh, they're out there. You could see the bare shadow or the whiteness of them. It was fascinating that they came so near, and like we were in and out the whole time, and they never minded us. And I was in the winter time, I'd be walking in and out, or during the springtime, and they never minded me at all. The head would be twisting sometimes when they'd be looking out at you, but I think they got climatised to us as we did to them. So it is. But I myself, since the owls came here, I'm farming, and I give up using rat poison. And since I gave up using the rat poison, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be run over. But I'd done it for the owl's sake. But we actually have less rats, I reckon, myself, since we started giving up the poison. And I used to use 2 buckets every year. So it's nature coming back to itself, I think, balances itself out if people leave it to themselves.
Now, we'll just leave it there, Andy, just if we're tight for time. But you can check out that video and others on our YouTube channel. But yeah, I think you're eager to get to the questions, so I'll leave it there with the video.
Lovely, John. You might just stop sharing with us there, and you'll come back into focus. John, thank you so much for that presentation. I mean, I don't know whether it was the Bush Telegraph or the owls that were moving, but it's one of our few webinars where the numbers that are watching have actually constantly increased right up. So there was obviously someone saying there's something good going on, and we've had a lot of comments in, John. I don't know whether you'll be cursing us or giving out to us after this, but there's an awful lot of people want to make contact with you, looking for clips of videos and all the rest of it. So we'll pull all those together, and we'll send you a full list of the Q&A, because we're not going to get through the amount of questions that
sure,
we have.
no, of course, yeah.
But just one thing, but while James is looking through some of the questions, rodent control, which is obviously key to the life of the owl. You'd love to get to the ultimate where you're not using it, but what's the best way of actually getting there? I presume you just can't suddenly stop on some commercial farms and then hoping that your owls will take over. Is there a good plan, simple plan that people could follow to get from A to B?
There is, yeah, and there's very good guidance, as I said, on the campaign for responsible rodenticide use about how to improve rodent control practices. But I suppose to be honest with you, like it's like you captured it well there. Like it's about making that transition from I think a lot of people are just used to using rodenticides, and one of the issues with rodenticides is that they are easy to use. They can be effective in terms of controlling rats and mice. But it's moving towards kind of reducing the need to use them in the first place, and then that can take changes around the farmyard to reduce the suitability for rats and mice in terms of storing foodstuffs, less less food available for rodents, but also then as well like taking the measures that maybe require a little bit more work than using rodenticides, but very much reduce the risk to wildlife, and that can be shooting, it can be trapping, and ultimately moving towards a more natural balance of predators doing the work that they should be doing, like barn owls and like other predatory species, that they're controlling the rats and mice. But I think that even if there is even if people are using rodenticides, like there are better ways of even using rodenticides. I think one of the problems that we face is that they're readily available, they're easy to use, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So you might just put out the rodenticides and then kind of forget about it. And one of the things is that in many cases, there might not be firstly a need to use rodenticides, and then as well we're also we need to bear in mind that once rodenticides are out there and used, that firstly that it's not just the target species, so the brown rat and house mouse that can be affected, it's a whole range of wildlife, but as well as that, what we're seeing is that brown rats in particular, that there's risk of them developing resistance to rodenticides, and that's happened in the past. And with that, then it means that it's almost a race to the bottom. We need to continue to develop more toxic rodenticides, which in order to control rats. But the flip side of that is that, you know, more toxic rodenticides, the risk to other wildlife is greater. So it does take, you know, increasing your awareness of the measures to implement, to, you know, in terms of rodent control, and there's no getting around it. It does take, you know, a bit more effort than just, you know, putting out rodenticides. But I think, you know, we all need to be moving in that direction, and just even in terms of, you know, food production and all, like to move away from that, you know, dependency on, you know, these chemicals and on toxins is definitely is definitely moving in the right direction. But
John, the other thing that has come in is the siting of nest boxes. Like, you know, say you can have a commercial farm that has no stone buildings, or, you know, I mean, and then you can have some farms that have a mixture of both. I presume equally you can have them in a woodland or whatever. What's the best place for siting the bird boxes?
Yeah, so we found the best place with the highest chances of success is if you have a building on the farm, and particularly, like you saw some of the you know, the barns and the sheds that are showed in the photos. So if you have a building that's, you know, and you can have it in a fairly quiet part of that building, then that's generally one of the best sites and locations. But if you don't have a suitable building, then typically, you know, an old tree, mature tree, that can be ideal as well. And you want just, you know, facing out onto open habitat, you know, kind of in an area where there's not a lot of coming and going, there's not a lot of disturbance. And generally, you know, most farms would have, you know, one or other of those options available to them. Now there are also, you know, I would say not every farm is suitable, and you need to bear that in mind as well. And say, for example, you know, farms that are, you know, quite close to a major road, then you don't want to be siting nest boxes there. Or if they're, you know, barn owls aren't really, you know, if you're fairly high up, like barn owls aren't really, you know, they're more a lowland farmland bird, like, but also as well, if there isn't any suitable habitat around, then it's you know, it's not great to, you know, to site a nest box to encourage birds. And I would say, just to add to that, like, we have we've made some videos which basically go through all of that and show examples of suitable habitat, unsuitable habitat, and all that. And all that is on the guidance that we developed for the barn owl action in acres. So if anything there, if you know, to definitely check that out if people are considering you know, putting up a barn owl nest box, or if they're wondering, you know, whether their farm is suitable or not.
Yeah, thanks, James. There's an avalanche of questions there coming in.
Yeah, they're still coming in. So John, maybe just to start with, maybe this one might be fully related to the talk today, but you mentioned the list of birds that were on the different conservation lists. Where do peregrine falcons appear in that list of endangered birds?
Yeah, very good question. So peregrine falcon is another one that would have and declined to even a more significant extent to barn owls if we go back a few years for somewhat different reasons, more for particularly DDT. Of organic chlorine DDT would affect peregrines, but they're another bird that's actually going in the right direction. We've seen their population recover. They're actually on the green list because of that recovery. So peregrines at the moment, we're starting to see, you know, they're still a rare bird, but compared to a few decades back, you know, it's a much more positive situation. And we're actually seeing now, just linking it to barn owls, we're actually seeing, you know, quite a few of those types of old ruined structures like castles and you know, and churches and abbeys, that peregrines, you know, are starting to colonize them. But in general, you know, that they're not without their, you know, their negative effects. And, you know, there is, you know, unfortunately, incidents of persecution of peregrines, of shooting, of poisoning, but in general, you know, at population level, the peregrines are starting to, slowly recovering after many decades of decline, and they are on the green list of birds conservation concern.
John, Mike wants to know why are barn owls doing so well in Munster and not so well in the northern part of the country?
Yeah, really good question. So we think that it's kind of, at least one of the main factors is related to these introduced small mammals, or invasive small mammals as they are, which is one, the greater white-toothed shrew, as I mentioned, and the other one is the bankfoal. And they're both species that they're not native to Ireland. They were accidentally brought over, and the bankfoal was brought over to Foynes in West Limerick. Accidentally, it was actually it hopped on board a shipment of machinery that was brought over to Foynes for Ardent Russia to build the hydroelectric dam at the time. This was in the 1920s. But anyways, they established and since then have done very well and have slowly increased their range. Now they're occurred throughout Munster and into most of parts of Leinster and Connacht now. But I think that was one of the reasons that Burnells had an additional prey item in Munster, whereas most of the rest of the country didn't during that period of decline. And then more recently, the greater white-leafed shrew has arrived. And they seem to, both of those seem to be of benefit to Burnells where they occur, and Burnells feed in fact, they're the two most common prey items for Burnells where they occur. So I think that's part of it. Possibly, and we're still learning about this, but possibly linked to that, if you think about it, is that, where Burnells are feeding on those species, they may be less likely to be exposed to rat poisons or to rodenticides because they're feeding less on brown rat and on house mouse. So it's possibly, related to that as well. But also I'm sure there's other factors like, the foraging habitat availability and, say, so parts of, Kerry, if you can imagine, with smaller field sizes, hedgerow networks compared to, more intensive areas, and that undoubtedly would benefit Burnells as well. So I think there's a range of factors, but definitely in there is these introduced small mammals, the bankpole and the greater white-leafed shrew.
John, so Alpine, I want to know, will long-eared owls use Burnell nest boxes also? Not typically, no. Now, it's not to say that they wouldn't, but the long-eared owls and they have a different sort of nesting requirements. So they actually, well, firstly, neither barn owls nor long-eared owls build nests themselves. So barn owls obviously are a cavity nesting species, and the nests, say, as you saw, like deep down chimneys and room buildings, or in a cavity, a hollow cavity in a tree, or a purpose-built nest box. Whereas long-eared owls, they actually take over an old stick nest. So say, for example, like a hooded crow, a grey crow, or a magpie would build a nest. They would use it 1 year, and then the long-eared owls would move in the next year, and that they wouldn't build a nest themselves. So they're an open stick nest species. So they typically wouldn't use barn owl nest box. They're not a cavity nesting species like that. But a really interesting species that they're as owls go, they're relatively common, but they're just it's very difficult to know where to see and to know if they're in your area. And they very much go under the radar, but a fantastic species as well, the long-eared owl. Okay, so I suppose you've addressed maybe the issue of rodenticides. So there has been a few questions on how do the levels of high levels of rodenticides affect barn owls. John, he's living up north, and he just wants to know, there's not many barn owls in his area, but would it be still worth installing barn owl boxes in that location? He's got grassland, woodlands, plenty of old buildings, and also a lot of hedgerows, mature hedgerows on his farm.
So in relation to the rodenticides first, so to be honest with you, we don't have a good knowledge of how rodenticide exposure affects birds, at an individual level. So what we saw, from the birds that we tested, was that we could see from the post-mortem and all that a small number of those had died from rodenticide poisoning, but the majority of them were birds that were killed on roads and that were killed for other reasons than rodenticide poisoning, but nevertheless it had rodenticides in their systems and for many at quite high concentrations. But it's very difficult to understand what effect that has on an individual bird. So obviously, it's not good, and you would suspect that it affects their general fitness, their ability to hunt and to breed. But it's we just don't know. It was a very difficult thing to study in a wild population. There was a study carried out recently, and was one of the first to actually link rodenticide exposure in a predatory bird to population declines, and that was over in Scotland in relation to kestrels, and that was published this year. And as I say, is one of the first. So that kind of indicates that I suppose that the concerns and the risks that rodenticide, exposure to rodenticides in a wild bird, the effects that it can have on them and on the population. And we would suspect it's the same with barn owls, but I can't say that we have really definitive information on that. So and in relation to the nest box up north. Yeah, so there's Ulster Wildlife Trust in Northern Ireland who carry out a lot of work on barn owls, but John is dead right. There's very few known pairs in the north, but I would say that the pairs that are there is most of them are in nest boxes. So I would say that where barn owls occur in very low numbers, that obviously the chances of uptake of nest boxes is going to be lower than obviously in areas where there's a lot more birds around. But I would say that as well, that we have seen that and I think Ulster Wildlife Trust and others would agree that there's another a guy that does a lot of work in Antrim as well, and in Down, Wee Man he's known as, but he would have done a lot of work on barn owls as well. And I think there would be general agreement that there's quite a limited availability of nest sites in terms of old ruined buildings, and so because of that, then obviously nest boxes can play a really important role in that, providing nest boxes. So while there might be fewer birds around, there might also be fewer nest sites around, and therefore still value in providing nest boxes.
John, just we're getting near 10:30, and just maybe to wrap up, there is a good few comments there on where do you get nest boxes, and actually we've had comments as well from the men's sheds that they are willing and able to make nest boxes. So we'll try and put all of that stuff together and send it on to you, and it might be of some use to you, or even there's a few people there specifically wanting bits and pieces that you might be able to get back to. John, thanks very, very much for that presentation. It was a wonderful presentation with the mix of sound and video. And thanks very much for the effort that you went to put that together. James, thanks for going through all those questions. We didn't get to a fraction of them, and apologies for that, but we will pass all of them on to John. Next week, we're going to be looking at actions for pollinators on farmland, and we're going to have Ruth Wilson from the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So that again should be a very interesting presentation, and I hope as many of you as possible can join us for that. Just really to thank James as well for going through all the questions, and thank Yvonne Maher in the background for putting the show and keeping us all on the straight and narrow. So until next week, I hope you can all join us again. So have a nice and a safe weekend, and hope to see as many of you as possible again next week. So thank you all very much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Andy.